Hello, and welcome to Draft Day. My name is John Fleming. I am one of the hosts of Draft Day. I am joined by the other host of Draft Day, Jason Bradshaw. Jason, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, John. Nice to be back with you. We've been haven't recorded in a little while with
Yeah,
life
it's been a
kind of
while.
being,
It's been a while.
you know,
Yeah, I
happy to be back
don't.
after some travel and just some time with family. So we're
Yeah,
ready to
I don't want
go.
to get too far into the behind the scenes drama as far as why this is our first episode in 3 weeks now. But I guess the word is going to get out eventually. After I put the upload in for our nearly 4 hour episode about Draft Day, a movie that neither of us particularly think is very good. Um, I got a knock door from some, very nice but very stern European fellows, and I have spent the last 3 weeks facing war crimes charges at The Hague, and eventually, I know that people had this idea that, oh, you just have to like plead your innocence if you're truly innocent. I understand what happened. I understand that there is some culpability. I took a deal, um, but thing is, I'm back. I will have to continue to pay my debt to society slowly over time, but in the meantime, I'm available tonight to record. I'm very glad that they apparently haven't gotten to you. I will be asking you to upload the next several episodes, but um,
Yeah,
other than that, though, and get back into the swing of things.
yeah. I was, luckily I have my connections in the we'll say in the Italian how do I say garbage business that maybe I have some friends that might have put in a good word, and maybe that's why you haven't gotten to me yet.
That's good. I do not have such friends, possibly because I encourage them to watch the movie Draft Day in preparation of the episode. So those contacts, those bridges have been cast away, even if unintentionally.
Yeah, you would have been better
Speaking,
off recommending your friends watch Castaway instead of Draft Day.
so Castaway. Now that I think about it, is Castaway a sports movie? It has a volleyball that's like one of the main characters, and they specifically reference Super 34, in which the St. Louis Rams defeat the Tennessee Titans. It's like one of the first things Helen Hunt says to her husband whenever she sees him.
Or is it a giant ad for UPS because FedEx crash lands you on islands?
You know, it could be. It also could be like kind of like
Say
an
spoiler
accidental
alert.
advertisement. Yeah, for anyone who was not familiar with the fact that the premise of the movie Castaway, which came out like 25 years ago, involves somebody being cast away.
True. It's true.
I haven't seen that movie since it came out. I don't really have any further thoughts on Castaway, but
Say, I mean, it's definitely been a solid at least 10 years since I've watched it.
in a minute. But also been a minute since we did an episode of Draft Day, one, period, but two, covering an actual professional sports draft. That changes tonight because we are covering one of the iconic drafts in sports history, the 1984 NBA draft. This draft obviously came before either of us was born, but has always had a special place in kind of sports lore. I will say from my preparation for this draft has a very excellent top of the draft. No question about it. It is not nearly as deep as its reputation. There'll be a sudden drop after, I would say, after pick number 4, in which we will go to some like good players, but not the all
Sure.
timers that'll be in the top 4. And then after a few picks after that, there's going to be some role players going on here. Granted, I think it's still a better draft than the 2013 draft we did before, But I would say in terms of like depth of the draft, this one's it's very top heavy.
Yeah, and I think, partially in response to your trial, if you will, this episode maybe going to be a little shorter due to its lack of depth. It's not going to be like the NBA draft where we just kept drafting them when we had our good friends Tyler and P Funk on.
Yeah, we're setting a hard limit at 12 picks, which may seem short considering that's like less than is in the lottery. So this draft predates the lottery by 1 year in the NBA, but there were only 7 total teams that qualified for what would be the lottery in that they didn't make the playoffs. This was back when NBA was a 23 team league. So we're still covering like a majority of the first round picks. So I think we're doing pretty okay.
To be fair, yes, while there was, I believe it was 10 rounds in this draft, 228 players were selected in this draft. Only 58 of them had at least one game played in the NBA.
Yeah, NBA drafts have been the most out of control historically in terms of like size of the draft relative to number of players that actually need to be drafted. Like obviously, like the baseball draft is longer, and hockey drafts have been longer. Even like the NFL draft has been as long. But NBA rosters are like 12 players deep. You don't need that, and there's not like an extensive minor league system. You don't need a draft that's that long, and yet there it is.
They sure did it anyway, didn't they? And I mean, I guess it's really cool for a guy like Roosevelt Chapman from the University of Dayton who is drafted, but
yeah, I think that there's kind of this weird thing where if a draft is, particularly if a draft is like longer than it needs to be, it does start to kind of get into the realm of like, for instance, in the NFL, you're better off being undrafted than being a 7th round draft pick, because if you're a 7th round draft pick, you don't have control over where you can sign. You at least some sort of negotiating power if you're undrafted. But at the same time, if you're like a super late pick in one of these old NBA drafts, your alternative is not signing as a free agent for a better position. Your alternative is still not playing in the NBA, but not being able to say you're a draft pick. So you at least get to have that kind of fun moment.
Yeah, I mean, as you were describing that, shout out to Cody Schrader, new San Francisco 49er, Truman State University
That's
legend.
Right. Well, luckily the San Francisco 49ers don't have any recent history of lowly drafted or undrafted players turning to be big parts of their offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's, it's fairly irrelevant to even bring that up. So.
All right, so as we always do, we decided the first overall pick via a game of pool. And Jason is back on top. Jason won our game of pool. I got off to a really good start. I thought I had it in the bag, but Jason had the big comeback. Jason will get the number 1 overall draft pick. If you're even remotely familiar with the 1984 NBA draft, you probably know the way he's going to draft, but I'm not going to be the one to congratulate like Melvin Turpin on being the number 1 overall pick. I'm going to make Jason actually make the pick himself.
Yes, and I'm going to go with, from the University of North Carolina, no, I'm just kidding. Michael Jordan, I think his name is, went 3rd overall in this draft.
Michael Jordan, the baseball player?
No, the guy from the Toon Squad player from kind of the independent leagues, who really made his name after defeating a bunch of aliens with the Looney Tunes. I don't know. But
interesting.
But he did go back to being a baseball player after they won that, if I remember right, dropped off by a spaceship to play for the Birmingham Barons. Shout out to the Birmingham Barons, the AA affiliate of the Chicago White Sox. At least at that time. I don't know if they still are, not to be completely honest.
They still are, yeah.
Okay. Well, and, I'm a little sour at the city of Birmingham right now, but that has nothing to do with this draft.
Cacaw.
Yeah, cacaw.
You have a fairly sullen cacaw for the moment.
Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of times on the first pick, we can sit and we can go into it. If you're even remotely listening to this, and I have to sit here and go through the accolades of Michael Jordan and explain to you why he's the number one pick, like, give me a call. We can have the discussion.
Yeah.
I'm not a person who likes to get into the MJ LeBron debate as far as like the GOAT goes and that kind of stuff. I just appreciate what Michael Jordan was, and like he was the man. Like, as I was getting old enough to watch basketball, like my dad, who doesn't enjoy basketball but would watch the playoffs sometimes in terms of NBA, like he would be like, "Oh, Michael Jordan's on. I'm gonna watch this." Like that, and like prime Showtime Lakers in terms of like Shaq and Kobe in my lifetime is what I remember him watching. And it was just a point
regarding the MJ LeBron debate, famously LeBron James was not in this draft, so
yes,
yeah, I think you're probably in the clear. But yeah, Michael Jordan, 10-time first team All NBA, 5-time MVP, was a Defensive Player of the Year one time, which I think is kind of an underrated part of his lore, is that he was also like a capital elite perimeter defender.
Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely something, I mean, he made the career of Steve Kerr. I mean, let's be honest. Mostly by fighting him in practice. I mean, like, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys who were kind of like really, other than Pippen, like just a lot of like solid rollers. Like even Rodman, who's a Hall of Famer, but is like really like a rebounding specialist, not a guy who had like a particularly developed game. Like, took some of these guys like Steve Kerr, like, Bill Wennington or something like that to unexpected heights.
Yeah,
I mean, congratulations to like Dick Simpkins on winning a ring or 3, but
yeah, I mean, and you put him with a guy like Phil, we put him with Phil Jackson too. I think, especially like we saw the triangle kind of work with the Lakers and stuff, but like the way that he worked, and Michael Jordan would have worked in any system, but I do think that Phil Jackson knew the little buttons to push with him to make it even better. Yeah. And if you haven't watched The Last Dance, like miniseries documentary, like just do yourself a favor, watch it. It's great to watch. Like, it's just fascinating.
Yeah. An interesting thing about Michael Jordan that I like to bring up when it comes to like, greatest of all time discussions is he's such a great player that every discussion is thereafter is filtered through the prism of player that kind of most resembles Michael Jordan. Because like really LeBron James and Michael Jordan, they're not like opposites, but they're not like, it's not like they have like exactly the same games. Like LeBron's always been much more like, kind of running the offense kind of player. He's bigger. Kobe's kind of the player who's the most similar to Jordan, but he's like clearly just was taking his style and kind of repurposing it. And there's so many guys in the NBA today that are like very clearly, that type of, like, they're trying to be that type of player. Like Anthony Edwards is playing a playoff game right now and is like very clearly trying to be kind of next gen, Jordan, Kobe, Jason Tatum, that type of player as well. And it's like such a dominant type of player that we have a hard time conceptualizing, comparing Jordan to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Wilt Chamberlain, or even if you want to go modern, like Nikola Jokic. It just seems weird because there's such a chiseled idea of what Michael Jordan is, and that like how could you be more great than that?
Yeah. No. Good point. Yeah. I think, and it doesn't hurt to be like a billionaire either, like in your post-playing career.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that his billions are perhaps related to his playing career pretty intrinsically. He's arguably not the most successful owner, but
it's another thing that changed the game, though. I mean, I know another movie that came out that I very much enjoyed, Air, but like that was game-changing, that type of stuff with the endorsements and like to see it in, at least in the sport of basketball. Like, I think if you want to go before him, like honestly, the king of like branding endorsements across any sport was like Muhammad Ali, because he was like everywhere when it came to branding and things of that nature. But in basketball, and to take it to that next stratosphere, because obviously by the 80s, boxing wasn't what it was in the heyday of Ali in the U.S. but he was able to take it and then just, shoot up. And there's another guy, in a similar vein that I heard. Think it was a guy who will be in this draft a little later, who did something like similar to make money and is still working tangentially with the
Yeah.
NBA in terms of. And I can't remember. I think it might have been Jordan who gave him advice to like, no, don't just take the money, like take stock and like use it to invest. Don't just take the money and live the glamorous life as a 22-year-old kid. Invest in your future kind of thing. He always seemed to be 2 steps ahead of the game on and off the court, if you will.
Yeah, I do think an interesting thing about Jordan, and it's kind of weird to make this comp given future events, but you think of somebody like OJ Simpson, whose marketing was very much built around like what a nice guy he was. Again, not taking future events into consideration, but that was kind of the whole idea, was he's very affable. And not that Michael Jordan was being marketed as a jerk or anything, but like he wasn't being marketed as like the most like cuddly nice guy in the world. He's being marketed as this guy is like a fierce competitor. This guy is like a killer, and that's cool, and that's what we're going to try to market. Because even like the Matt Johnson, Larry Bird advertisements, which neither one of them was ever as big as Jordan, but like they definitely had a lot of national endorsements, but they were still being marketed fundamentally as nice guys. Michael Jordan was being marketed as a god.
Yeah, which is funny. It's like Magic, probably nice, but like when you hear the stories about like what Larry Bird was like on the court, it's like
Oh yeah.
hilarious to me. Like how he just like the ultimate trash talker is a dude from French Lick. But
I mean, both of those guys were intense competitors, but Jordan sort of took that archetype to levels that we have never seen before. And frankly, like it's kind of for the best that not every player is as completely like crazy as Michael Jordan. Probably for the best that like
I think I don't know.
Like one is the correct number of them for there to have been.
Yeah, I mean it's like Kobe may be the closest. Just hearing how he went about things at time, maybe more in his prime, not his entire career as much as maybe Jordan was, but it. Bless you.
Oh, thank you. But I thought I'd muted for the entirety of that.
Enough time on Jordan's the top pick. Obvious.
Yeah, he's the correct number one. Fair enough. I have the number 2 pick. So you'd really have to kind of galaxy brain to try to argue anybody other than Michael Jordan. I will point out that as much grief as Portland gets for drafting Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan, Houston drafting Hakeem Olajuwon really does not get a comparable amount of grief, and that's because like Hakeem Olajuwon's one of like 20 players in the history of the NBA where drafting him over Jordan would not be considered an embarrassment. Obviously, I'm not drafting Hakeem over Jordan, but I am going to take him at number 2. Yeah, the stats are really strong. He was a 6-time first team All NBA, and in an era that there were a lot of really good centers in. He was competing against Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, like that for a long time, and he was kind of like the king of that group. He won an MVP, he won a couple titles, and granted those were during the Jordan retirement years, but still not an easy league by any means. And a player who was such a dominant force for those Rockets teams, and really the reason that the NBA draft lottery exists is because of Hakeem Olajuwon. His teams were very transparently like basically trying to lose when it came to the 83-84 season once they were out of it, because they're like, we want to get this Hakeem Olajuwon, and like it worked. I mean, they could have gotten Jordan obviously, but like most years Hakeem Olajuwon is the number 1 pick going away, and nobody would ever question it. But there's kind of like a small part of like a small galaxy brain part of me that does kind of wonder, like, does Houston regret the pick? Because they got a guy who like went to college in Houston. He immediately made Houston like a really good team. Like they aren't thought of as being a really good team in like the late 80s because the Lakers kept winning the West, but like they were consistently up there. They were consistently competing. And he brought 2 championships home, and I think I would still probably take my chances with Michael Jordan, but it turned out quite well for them, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I don't think sure about it. If you ask the Houston GM if he could go back and take Jordan number 1, I think he would be remiss to at least not heavily consider. Obviously it's
I feel
a
like he
little
would
bit,
dance around. He'd be like, Hakeem Olajuwon was a great player for us,
and
like the
and
greatest
it's like
player in the history of the
isn't
franchise.
in the sense of he's the only other player in this draft, even maybe like while there's two other really good players. Olajuwon's the only one that like okay at the time, and like you said, you have to look at the time. I mean, you know, Olajuwon star in Houston, and maybe a knock would just be like the team he played with at Houston was also incredible in college,
Sure, yeah,
but obviously, famously lost to Jim Valvano and NC State. You know, from Lorenzo Charles, uh, but
yeah. I will say I looked at that team fairly recently. That NC State team had like more NBA players than I thought they did, but yeah, you would not think that the Hakeem Olajuwon Clyde Drexler team would lose to them.
yeah, I mean it's and obviously you think about it too. It's like we may get to it later, but like as I kind of judge about like Jordan went 3 and like he had a teammate of his go 4. Like I mean, so I mean another guy who played for a very good college team and
That's
they
true,
did win it and
and
they
won a
did win it.
title.
So yeah, I mean, but Elijah won a guy who for me, I remember him like as a kid. It seemed like he was another one of these guys that it was like the big men when we were young. It was him, David Robinson, Shaq. Like these were guys like when I was a kid, I remember seeing like in any like a Sports Illustrated for kids. Those were the kind of guys that would be in these magazines. He was a big, you know, thing in terms of bringing in an entire continent to the game as well. I mean,
Yeah. And at the time, like drafting a center just seemed like the obvious and safe move. Like
right.
the main reason that Sam Bowie went over Michael Jordan is not because people thought Sam Bowie was like on balance a better player necessarily. It's because you need a center. Obviously, you need to get like and then of course Michael Jordan and those Bulls teams became like maybe the first NBA champions ever that didn't have like a preem center or at least like an upper half center. Like all due respect to like Bill Cartwright and Luke Longley, it was very
Yeah,
much being run by the wings.
right. And I mean, to be fair though, it's like you had Jordan in the sense like a guard who, yes, you know, not the biggest, but would get in there, would rebound and do everything. Like, he wasn't
Oh yeah,
it wasn't like, you know, not to bash, he's great in his own right, but like, not like Steph Curry shooting up shots. You don't see Steph banging bodies on the inside, kind of a thing.
yeah, and I think Steph has a more developed game than he gets credit for. He's a much better defender than his reputation. He's a
He's a better
good
defender, better
passer,
passer.
but like Michael Jordan did everything.
Yeah,
Like you could tell me that Michael Jordan like demanded to play center, and I don't think he'd be as good, but I think he probably like hang because he could jump so high because he was so tough because he was. And I realize that I'm now using this period to talk about Hakeem Olajuwon to talk about Jordan again, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, what can I say? You got the guy, but I'm not going to be upset about Hakeem Olajuwon, who is a very good player.
And a thing to put up too, like interesting, yes, Jordan, but I mean, Olajuwon played 3 more seasons than Jordan did. Played 18 years. Jordan only had 15 professional seasons. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, Grant Jordan had the couple retirements in between stints, but like you wouldn't think a player like Hakeem would necessarily hold up as well because he's bigger. I mean, he wasn't like huge for a center. He was like a little under 7 foot, I think, but
yeah, he was.
still not a guy that you would think of as necessarily having like an incredibly long career. And like even in the late 80s when he was or like late 90s when like Scottie Pippen and another player who will probably be going within the next couple picks were his teammates. Like he was still like the guy on that team, even on that Rockets team, even though he was like in his late 30s at that point.
It was, he definitely had consistency, which yeah, from any big guy, you would, to stay at that level was definitely. You know, an accomplishment, an achievement, I guess we'll say. But
All right, you're on the board at number 3.
And this is, you and I were talking before, this is maybe the hardest pick to make in this draft. Because I think...
Yeah, number 3, number 1's a really easy pick. Number 3's a really easy pick. Or number's a really hard pick. Number 4 is an extremely easy pick. Yeah. You might as well just make my pick for me whenever you're on, because it's very clear who...
It's kind of, and maybe we talk about them both. Like, after I say who I'm taking, we can say you're, and we can kind of... Because I think you have to compare them in some instance to just kind of say. So, after much deliberation and thought, I'm going to take Stockton at 3.
Nice. I wanted Barkley. That's cool. All right.
Okay. And again, this is maybe some personal stuff aside. I know Stockton has had some potentially questionable comments. I don't follow it.
Yeah, but also like he leads the NBA in assists all time. Like he's a really good player.
Yeah, and you know, and a thing, you know, some interesting things. Led the NBA in assists 9 times. You know, obvious. Led the league in steals twice. Like, and made the all defensive team 5 times. Like, another guy who maybe you don't think of, but in terms of perimeter defending, was really good for a small dude at only 6'1", like $170. Like, maybe the most unassuming guy. And, you know, I know people sometimes like, oh, well, when you know, when a bunch of your assists are coming to like Karl Malone, but it's like, look at guys who played like Jordan and like, I mean,
it's not like Magic Johnson wasn't passing to Kareem a bunch, like.
Right. It's like, oh, late in his career, James Worthy. Okay, that's fine. I guess you could pass there. Yeah, whatever it is. It was Stockton, just, you know, all around, but like at the same time too, like it wasn't like he was averse to scoring. Like for a dude who averaged double-digit assists for his career, he averaged 13 points too. It's not like he didn't shoot. Like honestly, like he probably could have been an even better player if he shot more.
Yeah, I think he was definitely a very efficient player and definitely kind of fit within that system quite well. Though you could also argue that like he was that system along with Malone, obviously. But I think that there were a lot of people just don't like John Stockton for like aesthetic reasons because, you know, whether it's because of like, you know, the shorts or whether it's because like he was kind of a dirty player or whether it was just people who liked Michael Jordan and wanted to root against those Jazz teams. But like, hard to like ignore the fact that he was, you know, a really good player. You know, a guy who 2-time first team All NBA, 6-time second team. There were a lot of pretty good point guards around that time. Obviously, he was competing against Magic Johnson early on. Like Gary Payton was coming in, you know, shortly after Magic was out of the way. But you know, John Stockton was just consistently, you know, one of the great players in the league, and gets name dropped in the current number 1 song in the United States of America. So congratulations to John Stockton on somehow winning the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef.
I mean, you know, how many years did it come after the number 1 song in which Steve Nash was mentioned in the song? So,
yeah. I mean,
I guess he's no Steve Nash. Kendrick versus Nelly Furtado, maybe we're.
Yeah. Well, I feel like Nelly Furtado would have to be on the Drake side just for Canadian exceptionalism. I know they're different parts of Canada, but still.
Yeah, I mean, you would think there'd be something there, but yeah, I mean, the hard thing was it was Stockton. Honestly, what pushed me was just leading the NBA all-time in assists over Barkley. Like Barkley, you know, and you could talk some, but has the MVP. Stockton never won an MVP, but Barkley did win one. Yeah, I think it was 92, 93. You know, Stockton does have an All-Star MVP, so that, I mean, to be fair, that probably meant a lot more in 1992, 93 than it does now, as we saw what the NBA All-Star game was
fair,
like
yes.
But
like, I actually appreciate that the NBA All-Star Games just embraced being a joke, but like, let's clear, it is a joke. It knows it's a joke, but it doesn't change the fact that no one cares. No one's trying.
But to be fair, back in that time, it wasn't a joke. Like dudes were going at each other. Like,
yeah, I mean, it was like definitely more wide open than like a regular season game, but it was closer to like how we perceive like the baseball All-Star game than it was to like the Pro Bowl, which has just always been god awful.
It's like, yeah, flag football game for, which, I
Yeah,
mean,
but
to be fair, like, when you play a contact sport, the last thing you want to do is get hurt in a
oh
game
yeah.
that fundamentally to what you're trying to accomplish doesn't matter. Like baseball, you're probably not going to get hurt. Just
Yeah,
continue
I
on.
mean, like there are still instances in baseball of guys like there's pitcher usage is very much curtailed. The fact that like the Pete Rose barreling into Ray Fosse is like some people venerate it, but a lot of people like immediately were like, "Come on, man, you can't do that."
Yeah,
And
I mean,
so,
yeah, obviously, now maybe guys not competing in like a home run derby, I guess, in MLB as well, where because just that amount of swings can just mess you up. I
yeah,
guess, famously, I mean, we've seen it happen to people, but Chuck, I mean, what's not to love? First of all, the round amount of rebound is like for me on the Mount Rushmore of sports nicknames. It's just fantastic.
yeah. On I think the second most recent podcast I recorded, which was not an episode of this, but I recited the entire list of of Charles Barkley's nicknames on Basketball Reference. There's a lot of them. He has many nicknames, two of which are actually used ever, but
Yeah, yeah.
a
I'm,
lot of them
I'm
are
looking
just
at
various ways of.
the wide load from Leeds. Never heard that one. The
Yeah, there
leaning
there are
tower.
some in there that. Yeah, there's a lot of just like fat jokes in there, which is really weird. And like Charles Barkley,
He was he.
it's kind of interesting.
He played. It was
Well, he looked.
Robert Trailer or something. Like,
Yeah, well, I part of it's just the fact that he was short for his position, so he was like
yeah,
viewed as and like, but he still had like the physique you would need to be a four in the NBA. But he was just like he was like listed at 6'6". He was probably a little shorter,
yeah. I
and
guess.
just kind of. And I almost wonder if like all of the jokes about his size and like the fact that like NBA on TNT they're constantly making fun of how he never won a championship. Which I mean, same goes for Stockton. They're arguably both on the like all-time team of guys that never won a ring. But I
Yeah,
think that maybe future generations are going to not realize just how good Charles Barkley was. He was five-time first team All NBA, five-time second team. He won an MVP like you mentioned. Doesn't have the defensive honors that some of the other guys we've referred to, but was not considered a bad defender by any means, and was a very good rebounder as the round of rebound would suggest. But yeah, he was just like a really good. Like he was awesome in Philly for a while. Like the fact that those Philly teams never. Like the fact that he never won a ring when he was like coming into the league playing with like Julius Irving and Moses Malone is wild to me, but I guess you need like a guard, but
yeah. I mean,
um
it is crazy that this team's never won anything, and
yeah, and if you look at like the Suns team that he took to the NBA finals, like he was by far the guy on the team. Like they had some other guys, like all due respect to like Jeff Hornacek or whatever, but like he was. And I think that may have been a little late Tom Chambers, but regardless, like this is the level of player we're talking about, rather than it's a little bit like whenever Jimmy Butler is like people are making Hall of Fame cases for him. I feel like people are just kind of be like, yeah, this guy was the best player on two teams that made the finals. Like, how many teams don't have their best player that made the finals in the Hall of Fame? And granted, there was not a lot of people disputing Barkley being in the Hall of Fame, but like he is that kind of player. Like, I think you can make a case that the four guys we drafted. I'm going to be conservative and say that they're all probably top like 25 players of all time. I think you could easily put them in the top 15. I wouldn't have a strong argument against it for any of them. Granted, the quality of this draft is going to drop a bit. There are still some good players. There are still some good players left. There are no more Hall of Famers, much less inner circle Hall of Famers.
yeah. I mean, it's to somebody who's like, it. I haven't made any ifs, ands, or buts about it in terms of like the NBA probably being of the major four sports, the one that I am the least familiar with. There's not, there's guys I'm like, oh yeah, I think I've heard of that guy, but there's not a ton that like the casual, like just general sports fan who doesn't follow the NBA is gonna be like, oh yeah, that guy. Like,
Yeah. So let's put it this way: of the four guys that have been drafted so far, the one that made the fewest All Star games was John Stockton, who made a mere 10 All Star games.
Sure.
If I'm doing the math right, the remainder of the draft has a combined 6. So
Yeah.
and there's there's a drop.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And it's, it does get interesting, from this point, I think, to really look at who's out there. I think you can make, I honestly think you could interchange 5 through, I don't know, 8 or 9, probably. Like it could go kind of any way. Again, in terms of just kind of your preference.
Yeah, some of it just does become a matter of taste. Like, let's put it this way. So, the 24th player on my board, who I know for a fact is not going to be drafted, just based on our kind of overlap, played 2 seasons in the NBA. There is a
yeah.
There is what one might call a tumble, but there are still some solid veterans
Oh yeah,
out there
absolutely.
for the taking.
Yeah, like the next
Curious
few
what
guys.
direction you.
Sorry,
I am curious what direction you take at number 5.
Yeah, I have it between a couple of guys. I think what I'm gonna end up. Sorry, there's people with very large dogs outside yelling across the street at each other, just talking while their dogs bark, and it threw me off for a sec. But anyway, going back to kind of who I'm looking at, what I'm thinking here, and I mean, like the two guys I'm looking at are just so stinking similar right now. The two guys I'm kind of between. I think just because, and this is purely going to be, I remember him more versus the other guy who I'm kind of confused with. I'm going to take Kevin Willis, I think, at 5.
Wow. Okay.
One-time All-Star.
True.
A one-time NBA champ. Very later in his career was was on a random year with San Antonio and got a ring. So good for him.
A deep bench guy on that team. Yes.
Yeah. I remember looking at his stats. Yeah, he played in.
He was a third-team All NBA one time.
What?
He was a third-team All NBA one time.
Hey, so he's got that going. But I mean, a guy who had a solid career of the players in this draft. He has the sixth most points. The other guy ahead of him that has been drafted is actually the other one I was considering. But played it, and the reason I get longevity, he had the longest career in terms of years, and second most games played in this draft behind Stockton. 21-year career, played in 1,424 games.
Yeah.
Averaged 12.1 points and 8.4 rebounds a game. Like, you do that over a 21-year career, like, it's crazy to me. Like, when you just think of the stats, you're like, man, this guy I feel like he should be more well known. But it's like, I remember him. Played at Michigan State. A lot. And that's the thing too. I think it's kind of funny in this draft. I mean, not funny, but like we don't always necessarily see now. Like, a lot of these guys went to like premier schools or schools that become premier. Like Stockton, obviously, maybe the start of like Gonzaga,
yeah.
hoops, but then UNC with Jordan. Houston was, like we talked about, great, and then you had Barkley at Auburn, I guess. Which, I mean, they were fine, but it was.
I mean, the real standout will come up later in this draft. If he's not on your board, he's on mine. But we'll cross that road when we get there, I think.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it's a funny college name if it's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that would be the one.
Okay, yeah. So, but like coming out of a traditional powerhouse like Michigan State, obviously we're 4 years removed from Magic or so leaving there. Was that it was year 79 or 80? I always forget which it was when
It was 79 was the year that they won.
they won. But was Magic drafted in 80 or was he drafted in 79?
He was drafted 79.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean,
like now that I'm thinking about it, the idea that like, I mean, Kevin Willis I think was a senior when he got drafted, but like it would have been like he'd been going on like his visit to Michigan State, watching Magic Johnson play, and he was in the NBA like through like me being in high school. That's crazy.
I mean, and to be fair, like according to Basketball Reference, a dude who for being has 5 nicknames, not the Barkley level of nicknames, but when Big Smoothie is one of your nicknames, like that's a pretty dope nickname. And for a guy named Kevin, he also looks a lot like Kevin Garnett, like just physically. Like look at his Basketball.
I never made that connection.
Like look at his Basketball.
I'm gonna look this up.
Sure. And it looks a little bit KG like to me.
He's definitely got the KG physique.
Yeah, I mean the shaved head helps too, obviously.
But. Yeah, they're not identical, but I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, not a spitting image, but I mean, and a guy too who for his career, I mean, he shot almost 50% from the field. That's why only 21% from 3. So, and a big guy too. I mean, 7-footer. Was 7 foot tall, or listed at 7 foot. So, I don't think I need to go in a whole lot. I feel like I maybe caught you off guard a little bit with that pick, but
he was a tricky player to evaluate. I didn't have 5. I had him at 8, I think. But a player who by VORP, which is like the closest basketball equivalent there's above replacement, he's actually negative. Is very surprising to me. I think it really comes down to like he just played forever and wasn't very good towards the end. But honestly, the reason he was able to keep getting jobs was because like people thought he was a good dude. That's why he was like playing garbage time minutes towards the end. Like during his prime, he was not like he wasn't a superstar, but like he was third-team All NBA for a reason.
Is -1, so it's like at worst you're essentially saying he's an average player. Like you're not saying it's like he was averaging a VORP negative most years, like you were saying, like he was
I mean there's like it would be like if you looked at like Albert Pujols' career WAR or whatever, and you were like, oh, so he was like a 4 or 5 win player for his career. It's like, well, kind of, but he was like a superstar for like half of it and like kind of whatever for the other half of it.
Yeah. And then his feet gave out. But
yeah. But yeah, I would say Kevin Willis, he has, despite the fact that he has as much longevity, like his peak makes him a viable option here. Speaking of going with peak, I'm going to go with a guy who played less than half of the seasons of Kevin Willis, a little more than half the games, but definitely the shortest career of guys that I have like towards the top of my board. Alvin Robertson, who was the number 7 draft pick. Based on your commentary, I don't think he was next on your board, but I just wanted to take this guy.
It's funny. It's reverse. I had him 8 on my board. So.
Oh, okay. So,
very effective in his time, but didn't have the longevity maybe that like Willis had.
Definitely. And probably not a player that like a lot of younger people, and frankly, like I kind of underrate him, I think too. But like, a player who was very good, was a 4-time All-Star, second team All-NBA one time. Despite the fact that he was a perimeter player, I kind of blank on whether he's a guard or a forward, but not a big man. Second 2-time All Defensive First Team, 4-time Defensive Second Team, won a Defensive Player of the Year in there. Was kind of a consistent contender for that. At his career numbers, I'm kind of wondering, it wasn't much of a 3-point shooter, but I'm kind of wondering in like the modern NBA, they would kind of be able to turn him in, like, be like, hey man, you just got to shoot a bunch of threes in the offseason. We're going to turn you into like, a 3-and-D kind of guy. And like, he's definitely a role player. At this point, we're drafting guys who we think would be like good contributors for teams. And, the thing about the NBA draft is, if you're drafting a guy number 6 overall, you're not expecting him to be like your franchise player. You're expecting him to be like a good starter for your team. And I think Alvin Robertson, at least for a decade, qualifies for that. And he went to Arkansas, which is not a very funny school name, but
No, it's not funny.
yeah, averaged 14 points a game, which I believe which is tied for the most of everybody who's remaining on the board. 5 assists a game, just kind of a generally well-rounded player. Like I said, that defensive acumen, love it. I'm kind of wondering. So I'm thinking about this in terms of like creating a team out of this draft, and I guess you could kind of like you probably wouldn't be able to put Kevin Willis in a starting lineup with Hakeem, but you probably put Alvin Robertson as like the clear weak link of like Jordan, Hakeem, Stockton, Barkley, and just like have the greatest team in the history of the NBA.
He could certainly be that guy. That would be an incredible like starting lineup. I mean, no offense, you just look at if we were really building teams with these 6 picks, like we got 3 pretty good starts if we're for these teams. Like,
yeah, like the thing is, if you're making a starting lineup out of this draft, you might be putting Alvin Robertson in it. Take back everything I said about putting up 3-pointers. He's not taking a shot. He is strictly playing defense against their best wing, just so Jordan get a breather. That's his entire role, and we'll be content with that.
100%. I think that it's I mean, I just think it's kind of it is where it's at, and now I'm trying to figure out. Trying to stall and figure out like because now I'm like, do I take the other guy I was bouncing between, even though they're very similar type players, or now that you've got this in my head, we could build a team. Do I take another guy?
Well, we're not really building a team. I am going to. I'll let you think for a second and point out that Alvin Robertson would be the Keith Bogans of the early 2010 Chicago Bulls. That's my reference. That is basically for myself and possibly for P-Funk if he's listening to this episode. I can't imagine anybody else will care.
But it's a good shout out. I can appreciate it for what it is, at least. All right. We're ready to go on to pick numero 7. I'm going to take a guy who, honestly, career almost mirrors Kevin Willis to an extent, except for having a little more warp. I think what was the last year, the Kansas City Kings.
I believe so.
And I'll take Otis Thorpe.
Yeah, there were to me there were 2 guys here that were. If it wasn't one of 2 guys, I'd have been confused, and that's one of the guys. So I commend you.
Yeah, and to be clear with Willis, like I said, the determining factor is like Otis Thorpe. Like I maybe kind of remember, even though he may have been better over his entire career. I think Kevin Willis maybe had higher peaks, and that's why I started maybe remembered him more, or maybe just because he played a little bit longer. Like maybe that's part of just as a passing NBA fan. But a guy who averaged 14 points a game for his career, 8 rebounds. I love the fact that you talk about guys who I'm just not gonna let shoot if he's on my team. Career 4.7% 3-point shooter.
Wow. I'm actually surprised. I didn't really look at it for obvious reasons. I'm kind of surprised that it's not like an extremely even amount. I would have guessed he was a career like 16.67% 3-point shooter because he shot 6 in his career and one of them went in, something like that.
So the in his career, let's see. Oh, this is only giving me per game. Where's the don't have the raw data in front of me, but let's just say the first career he averaged 0.1 3-pointers attempted per game.
That sounds right.
But to be fair, like he shot 54.6% from the field. So like this was a dude who, from what I remember, he wasn't shooting from outside of 6 or 7 feet from the basket probably most of the time.
Yeah, he was a definite type of player. It was not a lot of ambiguity to the type of game he had.
Yeah, I mean, was an All-Star in 1991-92. Won an NBA championship in 1994 with the aforementioned Houston Rockets. Was on those teams as well.
I think he had a decent role, if I remember right. I obviously he wasn't like Hakeem or Clyde Drexler, but I think he was. I think he was in the rotation at least.
He played and started every game that season. Averaged 35 minutes a game on that team. So, he averaged, what did he average points that year? I hate the acronyms on this. Averaged 14 points a game. So, which was his actual career average.
Yeah.
Kind of like a crazy thing that made with him. I remember had a peak of averaging 20.8 points a game at 87-88. So, like,
wow, yeah,
20 point a game scorer, and season before that he's 18.9 points a game. So definitely
solid value at number 7. Yeah,
and I think ranked fairly high, and not. I mean, his VORP was pretty decently high. Compared to some of these other guys, 19.1 career VORP, and then 106.4 career win shares, which was also up there. And fairly high then too when you take it to win shares per minute of game time, if you will, per 48 minutes. That was 6th in or 7th in this class, excuse me. But yeah, I mean, solid and long. How I always tend to like the longevity. I mean, a guy who played 17 years, so.
Yeah, and he's a player that also I associate very strongly with the NBA draft. Not with his NBA draft, but the fact that he got traded by the Pistons quite late in his career, and that pick turned into the number 2 overall draft pick for Darko Milicic. Which they used the pick on Darko, and they still won the trade. So good for them.
I mean, it's a good thing there wasn't anyone else they could have taken at 2.
No. For anyone who doesn't get that reference, listen to our episode where we drafted draft busts, because it comes up. I believe I drafted them, but it definitely comes up. All right, number 8 overall pick. I'm going to go with the player that I assume you're referring to as having a similar career as Otis Thorpe. I had him right next to him on my board. They both played 17 seasons within 30 games of each other. Go with Sam Perkins.
Yep.
Out of the University of North Carolina. It's a pretty solid player. I think that there were probably expectations, with him being on those Jordan teams in college, that he would, be a little bit more of a dominant player than he was. But he was a good, solid, kind of rotational center. Don't really have anything too inspiring to say, I guess, about him beyond that. Probably a little bit weaker of an offensive player than Otis Thorpe, probably a little bit better defensively. He got DPOY votes once. He won a title. I'm trying to remember. I have this vague memory in my mind of Sam Perkins playing. Actually, he did not win a title. I was looking at somebody else. But for some reason, I always feel like Sam Perkins should have been the 12th man on those Bulls teams with the Jack Haley role, where they were just basically signing Dennis Rodman's friend. But solid career. Probably slightly worse than Otis Thorpe, but at number 8, I'm quite content with that. And yeah, it's my top 8 players are the ones that have been drafted so far. So
it's the same with me. I think I do think maybe these were fairly easiest in terms of a top 8 kind of thing. Maybe one other guy, you can start to make some different cases maybe after this, but yeah, I mean, Perkins, a guy who, with the uncertainty of the NBA draft, maybe not as dynamic as you'd want to see somebody taken top 5. I mean, he was taken right after Jordan, but
yeah,
when you, like I said, when you compare that, of games played in this draft, Sam Perkins is 3rd behind Stockton and Willis, in games played. So
real wow.
Yeah,
did not realize that.
Games plays. He's
played more games than Hakeem Olajuwon. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Now he's, in terms of minutes, he's 7th.
Well, sure.
But still speaks to like, and this is the thing. It's like I think, and I try to think in terms of just like, even if you're not getting a ton of minutes, if a coach is putting you in, whether it's due to an injury or a blowout, like you're still getting time. You're not the last guy on the bench who's never gonna see time. You know.
Yeah, and like we don't go deep enough into these drafts that this would be like necessarily a consequential thing, but like once you get past like the premium stars, like games played, minutes played, like those are relevant stats. Like there's like probably a tendency that people, including myself, have that you'd look at like a WAR, a VORP leaderboard or whatever, and be like, oh, this player is like native for their career, or they're like around zero or something like that. But if they played for a bunch of seasons, it means that they were trusted by somebody, and I am not going to necessarily start erecting their Hall of Fame bust for it, which
Yeah.
is definitely a relevant reference in basketball. But
Yeah.
still,
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to go to the advanced stats, Perkins has the highest VORP in this draft that isn't one of the top four, like
yeah,
at 29.1. So
it's close, but yeah.
yeah. So, but at the same time, yeah, but honestly, it's him and Robertson, and then there's this, a fairly steep drop. Like,
Yeah.
they could be their own tier if you're just looking at advanced analytics. And I think, you can do this some, but
Yeah, I'm less inclined to look at the analytics with older guys, just not because the same things didn't matter, but just because like the game was just played in a different way. And a guy like Sam Perkins probably isn't going to be as relevant or as strong of a player to have or Otis Thorpe for that matter, in like the modern NBA, because you want to have a big man who can like shoot a little bit. Like I was watching like Chet Holmgren playing yesterday for the Thunder, and be like, yeah, this guy hitting like 30% of his 3-pointers. That's kind of like a necessary part of the deal, and it's weird that the sport evolved that way. But like
you don't get a
Sam
17
Perkins,
year
Otis
career
Thorpe.
now being a guy who shoots a big guy who's shooting 4.7 from three, probably. Like,
Yeah, like you. I think let's put it this way: like they've let Shaq play in the modern NBA. Like you have to be that physically dominant at the things where physical dominance matters in
it's
order to justify the lack of
yeah.
shooting
And
skills.
I mean, and to diverge just a little here, we were talking about kind of looking at advanced analytics in this draft. My favorite person in this draft, and I'm assuming he's not going to be drafted by either one of us, but is Ralph Jackson. Like analytically, he has one career game played, 12 minutes, but he had 2 points, a rebound, and 4 assists. So like his per game stuff is like his win shares per 48 is fifth in this draft because he like had at least numbers in the stat line.
Like Matt Pagnazzi of the NBA, he just has like such a short, like Keith McDonald, just like such a small sample. It's like, man, if they just let him keep it up, he was gonna be a Hall of Famer.
It's like, the dude played one game, so it's like, but when you just look at some of the advanced stuff, like that's the kind of stuff that could happen. And
Yeah.
I thought it was funny, but
all right, you are up at number 9.
All right. Let's get a funny university out of the way.
Okay.
Number 9.
I would argue you're getting the funny universe out of the way.
Yeah. This is a young man, and maybe the deepest pick that gets taken in this draft. Honestly,
Deepest,
too.
you say?
Giggity. 46th overall pick out of Longwood. Yes, that's right. Longwood University. Not Jerome Kersey. Jerome Kersey.
For a second there, I thought you were drafting a different player out of Longwood University altogether. I was like, all right, I guess I'll take Jerome Kersey next, but
No. Yeah. Sorry, let me introduce him correctly. 1999 NBA champion, Jerome Kersey.
Good for him.
Outside of the funny university name, I mean, like a serviceable NBA guy. You look at him really like the 87-88 season through 90-91, 91-92. Like, he started that first year, averaged 19.2 a game. in Portland. Keep in mind, I don't think Portland was a huge powerhouse at this point.
Well, was he on the '92 team that made the finals?
Yeah, but I'm talking like when he was starting his
Like the
career
late
and
'80s.
putting up bigger numbers.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
But he would have been playing with say what is Drexler? Was he there?
Drexler would have been around. Yeah, Drexler was the draft before
After.
this, I think.
Was he before or
Oh,
after?
yeah, after. Okay.
I
I
can't
thought
remember,
he was
but
before, but I could be wrong.
I don't know. One of those, but yeah, around there. But a guy who, again, serviceable. Seems to be. He did have another one of these. I think 17-year guys. 10.3 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.9 assists. What seems to be a trend with my team. Won his NBA championship with the San Antonio Spurs.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah, looking it up, not only was he on that Portland team that made the finals, he started 76 games for them and was their third leading scorer. So, apologies to Jerome Kersey for my neglect.
yeah, so I mean, did if you look in his career in terms of games played, his rookie year through 96, 97, only played less than 70 games twice, and those were 63 and 65 games played. So like you have like a freaking 14, 15-year stretch or whatever where you're playing 70 plus games a year. You're doing something right, Like I said, with the stat line and everything, like fairly unremarkable, maybe shadowed a little bit with, you know, his last couple of years in Portland through the end of his career. Never averaged more than 8 points a game. So
Sure. I mean, that's just kind of what
that
aging as an NBA player is. Like toward the end, you start to, like the Kevin Willis thing. It's kind of an extreme example of it, but
yeah, and
kind of
not
starts to tail off.
I the guy for his career, like I don't think this is an insignificant stat. Average 1.2 steals a game in his career.
Yeah.
Like that's I think maybe sometimes we take steals as a stat for granted in terms of like what it actually means. And I know now there's obviously a lot more tracking internally that happens with like deflections and turnovers caused. You don't get credit for the steal and that kind of stuff. Like,
Well, I think that
but
with steals, it's just that like the number is so low, like compared to like points where that number can get into like the 30s or whatever. Steals is like a few.
yeah. And however, though, his greatest stat career stat line number is his career free throw percentage is
Oh, I
exactly
wonder what this is going to be.
69% on the nose. So well done,
Yeah.
sir.
I would do the nice thing, but I feel like that could be a little higher. But I guess it's better than it being 69.2%.
I mean, to be fair, like if there's one thing that my team with like my last three picks is going to struggle to do is please don't put them on the line. Put Jordan and Stockton on the line because I think Stockton's like a career like 87% free throw shooter or something.
Yeah, Jordan can hold his own too. I think he'd be.
Yeah, I mean, no offense to Stockton, games on the line, I still probably want Jordan at the line, but
Yeah, looks like Jordan's a career 83.5, Stockton's a career 82.6. So I mean, really, either way, you're doing okay.
yeah.
All right, so I feel like I put some respect on Jerome Kersey's name after that. Now here's a man though with a name that I will not put any respect on his name because I am drafting Vern Fleming.
Of course you are. I was hoping he would. Your cousin Vern.
Yeah, obviously we look just alike, but yeah, Vern Fleming was really long-term player with the Pacers, kind of correlated with the rise of Reggie Miller once he got to the team years later. Granted, he was kind of replaced once they were like getting ready to take the next step as a starter, not being like Mark Jackson came in and he suddenly was not starting anymore, but was a pretty strong player. If you go to like the Indiana Pacers basketball reference page, he's like one of the players pictured for franchise leaders just because he played there for so long. But just kind of a well-rounded point guard. A little big actually for a point guard. So actually, a player I think could probably do relatively okay in terms of versatility in the modern NBA. The 18% career 3-point percentage might not quite translate as well, but at the number 10 pick, if I'm getting a guy who, even at number 10, you're probably not expecting him to be like a full-time starter for you, but you get a guy that can kind of guard both positions defensively and can run the show for a little bit, and he's a player who, looking at his career numbers, he's a 4.8 assists per game, which is not a whole lot of guys here above that. Granted, there's a lot of centers in the draft, but put up 11.3 points and logged a number of minutes, 27.7 a game. It's mostly just like the guys at the very top who are above that.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, I had him one spot lower on my board, so like I'm gonna get the guy I had at 10 at 11, but I mean, and to be fair, he's a very similar-ish type guy in terms of overall, and it hurts me because I won't lie, I wanted very badly to be able to draft Sam Bowie, just to put a little respect on his name as a somewhat respectful bull guy, but I guess I can leave that ball in your court for the final pick if you so choose.
Yeah, he's in the discussion for this. Like drafting Sam Bowie here would not be a monster reach.
No, and I'll say he ended up 13 on my final rankings, but
yeah, he's 13 on mine as well.
At number 11, take another guy who's another little guard, but surprisingly pretty decent numbers entire career. Jay Humphreys is who I'm going to end up taking next. A guy who, you were saying like he did a little bit higher than a couple of stats you even mentioned. He averaged 29.3 minutes a game, 5.5 assists per game, 1.5 steals per game. Drafted out of the University of Colorado.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of how to make a Coach Prime joke, but I should have made a Richard Roby joke. Dang it, screwed that up. Dude was at Colorado for like 14 years, but I know Richard Roby is. I feel like I have to say at least was a big fan of the show. Richard, just joking with you, if you're listening. But
yeah, I believe Richard Roby played with Jay Humphreys and Chauncey Billups, and I was going to try to think of a more modern Colorado player, but that would require me to remember recent Colorado players. So
not named Richard Roby. So
pretty much, yeah.
But I mean, a guy who, this was honestly a little surprising to me. Started out with Phoenix, but we went to Milwaukee. Had a stretch where he averaged 15-3, 15-2, and 14 points a game in a 3-year stretch, all while averaging 6 to 7 assists per game. So, a guy who, maybe a little later than some of these other guys, but was putting up, pretty good numbers with, albeit at that time, maybe because he was with Milwaukee is why he was able to put up those numbers, because who else was going to do it for Milwaukee? But
Sure.
He, then rounded out his career with Utah and then a year with Boston. But, and by the time he got to those, he was just not playing a ton, although he did play 78 and 75 games. And it was 2 years with Utah before then the final year where he didn't play very much. But, again, a guy, if you can get a dude who has, was it 13 or 12 NBA seasons, 11, something like that, with those serviceable numbers, it's honestly the last pick. So it's like, get some production, and I got to have a backup to Stockton. So. Because that's the big thing for the sixth man is when you have John Stockton to get him a backup when you're only drafting 6 guys.
Yeah. Some real Costner going after David Putney kind of vibes there with your pick. Okay, I think I just barged through my door, so I better get my pick in quickly here. I don't think Interpol's. I'm not sure exactly what they're up to right now, but anyway. Next pick, with the final pick of this draft, number 12 overall, I'm going to go with a player who basically had one skill, period, managed to play into the 21st century. I'm with Michael Cage, who was a player who was drafted by the Clippers, where he led the league in rebounding in his fourth season, which is pretty neat. Kind of continued that with the Seattle Sonics. Player that I mostly associate currently as being the color commentator for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He is terrible at it, but I am not drafting him to commentate on basketball games and like mispronounce fairly well-known players' names. Drafted him to get boards because getting Hakeem Olajuwon and Charles Barkley and Sam Perkins wasn't enough for that.
Yeah, if we miss shots, we're in trouble.
Yeah. So yeah, that's our draft. Did you have any other than Sam Bowie, who we both shouted out? And I had Cage ahead of Humphreys, but Humphreys was my number 12. So
Okay,
sounds
so
like not too
drafted.
wildly dissimilar of boards.
Yeah, I honestly like outside of those guys, like, I don't like Danny Young.
Falls off.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Danny Young would be like he was the 14th guy. I only did out to 14. I'll be honest. And Danny
Young was my 14 as well, and I have nothing really to say about him. So
yeah, he went to the same school as Tim Duncan.
That's true. I think when it comes to like some of these older drafts, it gets a little bit harder to like have like these revered like obviously we have a lot to say about like Jordan, Olajuwon, those guys. It's a lot, but like for instance, whenever we did the 2013 draft, like we had like nice things to say about like Mike Muscala. Like whoever the equivalent of Mike Muscala is in this draft, I've never heard of before. Like, if we're being completely honest, like
I think that
he was out of the league before I was paying attention.
Right, and that's the thing too. Yeah, like these guys are playing 4 or 5 years before I was even born. And then you get into obviously then even being old enough and basketball, the last sport that I maybe started to follow. Like I'll be honest, like I didn't really get in. Like my first real memories, like I remember watching Jordan some in the playoffs. With the Bulls. Like the Kobe Shaq Lakers was like me coming home from church on Sunday, watching the NBA on NBC and dancing to the greatest sports theme of all time, and then hearing, watching Shaq and Kobe battle with like Peja Stojakovic, Vlade Divac, and Doug Christie of the Kings or whatever. And
yeah, I mean, it was like I think that we both kind of had like a little bit of a delayed process. And granted, this was like when you were like 10. It's not like this was like a late in life thing, but
not like mid-20s discovering what the NBA was or anything.
Yeah, but like also like we grew up in a city that had a baseball, football, and hockey team. We were following those sports. It wasn't like we were like had some sort of principled stance against watching the NBA. It just happened to be there wasn't a St. Louis team, so it was a little bit less on the radar.
We didn't have the local Fox Sports Midwest or whatever. I know in some areas they would show like Pacer games and stuff, but not in St. Louis.
Well, they do that. They do that now in St. Louis. Now in St. Louis, they show Pacers and Grizzlies games. Which, if they had done that when I was a kid, I would have probably become a Pacers or Grizzlies fan. And instead, I started gravitating towards the Bulls because even though they're awful post Jordan, they had a bunch of games on WGN. So
yeah,
it was just available to watch.
It was a local Chicago-based station, but was available nationally.
Yeah, which is like I missed out on the era of like the Atlanta Braves being terrible, but all their games being on TBS.
Yeah,
I got the era where they were good and on TBS, but it's the truly lousy years. So I feel like the Bulls, I was able to get like my version of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think down here I get Pacers. I think it's only Grizzlies down here. Makes sense.
Surprised it's not the Thunder. I would have thought OKC was closer to Springfield than Memphis, but
it's about the same. Because I'm trying to think. Because OKC's how far is OKC from Tulsa? An hour and a half or so.
I've never been to either city, but that does sound right.
I mean, it's funny. Like it's been a while. I used to go to Oklahoma State for work. Obviously, the only NBA game I've been to, I saw Russ drop 50 on the Jazz in Oklahoma City. But yeah, I can't. It might be a little closer, but I don't know, with Jason Tatum's voting on his shoes or whatever, I've just been able to watch whatever NBA games I want to. So St. Louis
Yeah,
still
it's been nice. Yeah, shout out to
and
Jason
really
Tatum
had
for
me
getting us.
because I wasn't really the know with it. You're like, dude, if you want to watch any games at all, then that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't really have anything else in terms of this draft. Nothing that's really pressing. I think this was a fun one to maybe get a comeback on and not have a super long episode on.
Yeah,
we still managed
I would
to talk
agree.
right now, but
Sure. I mean, I'm doing like snippet episodes here. Got to do something. Got to give people something to listen to.
oh, trust me, I could sit here and vamp for another hour, or I could go to sleep.
Oh, we don't. Sleep sounds really cool, but before you do that, I think I'm going to go ahead and give a little recap of the draft picks that we made. Jason selected Michael Jordan, John Stockton, Kevin Willis, Otis Thorpe, Jerome Kersey, and Jay Humphreys. John, selected Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles Barkley, Alvin Robertson, Sam Perkins, Vern, not John, Fleming, and Michael Cage. So, those are the picks. Anything else you want to say? Anything you want to shout out or advertise or?
Gotta do the shameless plugs. Follow the show at Draft Day Pod on Twitter. Follow me at Draft Day Dadshaw on Twitter. Don't try to seek me out and friend me on Facebook. That's creepy. And that's the extent of my social media use. I think I have a TikTok, but I've never posted anything to it, nor do I look at it. I just got sick of my wife texting me TikTok videos and not having the app, so that's why I have it. What about you, John? Where can the peeps find you?
I have a similar relationship to TikTok, except that I never got a account, and the person that texted me the TikToks is former guest Tyler, so different situation. But you can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky at JohnJF125. Check out stlbullpen.com. Haven't done a crazy amount of writing on it recently, mostly because the Cardinals are a drag, and I don't really have a lot to say that hasn't been said a million times before. But they're on a 3-game winning, or they were on a 3-game winning streak until yesterday. I forgot that they played yesterday. My bad.
Yeah, they tried real hard, and by tried real hard, I mean laid an egg. But
look, as somebody who was pretty tired yesterday, but wanted to stay up for the Thunder Mavericks game, I appreciated them scoring 6 runs the day before, so I could get a cheap soda and persevere through it.
You just gotta rub it in my face. That's like, it's one of the things I miss, especially because growing up, like where my parents live now, well, let's just say that On the Run is extremely close.
You're gonna dox your parents here?
I mean, there's a lot of locations of On the Run in St. Louis.
I mean, it's more specific than the guy that said Harrison Butker lives in Lee's Summit that you learned.
It's funny. I love the blog post that you posted. I think it was that today.
Yeah,
about that one. I thought it was interesting, and I say it as a guy who, like, people who may not understand this about you and me, and this has nothing to do with the show, but I've always appreciated your writing and your point of view, but like it's funny because we get along great and everything, but politically, like, we're fairly different in terms of how we see things. Now, admittedly, you're maybe a little more politically involved in following things than I am at this point. Just, that being said, with Harrison Butker, the funny thing is this is how viral that moment. You would think I would be the one like telling my wife, "Whoa, did you see this stuff?" No, she's the one telling me about it.
I had text from my sister about it. It was very weird.
Yeah, like it became a big deal on TikTok and stuff, and obviously, maybe more so than you, I live in very much Chiefs country.
Yeah, that's true.
However, much more of the people align with Harrison Butker's views, perhaps, on at least a majority of it. And to say, like, I'll say, like, there are some things he says that I agree with the principle, but he goes a little further than maybe I would in some of the things.
I think that's mainly his what he does. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you said in the article. It's like I knew it's not the first time he's done this. He does it for the outrage. That's what he was going for. And
Sure.
I mean, frankly, Benedictine should have known that when they asked him to be the speaker. And maybe they did. They're like, hey, we can get.
They probably did. Like,
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is
like,
they're a liberal arts college. It's not like he was doing this at some conservative university.
but also it's like it's Benedictine. It wasn't like he was at like, you know, Cal or some like school that you associate as being like, you know, commune basically.
Well, yeah, it's not like, you know, he wasn't out there, you know, at UCLA after the, you know, what's been going on there with the pro.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That type of stuff. Because we know where he would stand on that. I digress.
I have an idea. Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's great basketball talk to wrap up the episode. But
you know, it's what we do here. It's you know, who knows? Maybe John will cut this out. Who knows when he goes to edit?
That's putting a lot of faith in how much I feel like editing.
As somebody who just said, sleep sounds great, I have a feeling this will be one of those export, set, and see you later nights for you. But although I don't know,
basketball games. I'll catch second half of the basketball game.
You watch, but
yeah,
I'll be honest. I've watched very little in terms of the NBA playoffs. I was really just hoping. You know, I was up in Philadelphia recently for work. I was really hoping that they would advance to the second round and somehow have a game while I was up there. Alas, they did not win.
They certainly did not.
So I was stuck with like a bunch of Knicks fans that I work with who were from New York and Rangers fans. It was fairly insufferable seeing them be happy while I just had to be sad.
Yeah. Rangers won tonight. They advanced.
Yeah,
I don't really care. All right.
Hey,
this could go on forever.
Yeah, I mean, and for anyone knowing like this vamp at the end, this is mostly how it goes anytime John and I are in the same room with each other, and we just like it's almost like an episode of Family Guy where there's like no storyline and we just like make a reference, go into quick bit, and then go to another bit.
Yeah, there's like a quick cutaway gag of wow, you think that's crazy? You remember the time? Yeah.
Yeah, and then Gene Shalit shows up and
yeah. We're gonna somehow incorporate the butt scratcher guy into this.
Yeah, I said that the other day that my son, you know,
Butker. That kind of works. Butker. Okay.
Anyway,
what
I
believe in rousing conclusion.
So I don't know. You don't get that right.
Bye, everybody.
I get better. See you guys.